In this video, I'm going to walk through break-even analysis. We start out with a company that sells a woven basket, just one product for $15 per unit. Its variable expense per unit is $12, and the company's monthly fixed expense is $4,200. They want us to calculate the break-even point both in unit sales, how many baskets do we need to sell, and also dollar sales. How many sales dollars of baskets do we need to sell in order to break even? Our formula for break even in sales is our fixed expense in total, which is already given to us as 4,200, divided by our contribution margin per unit. In this example, again, our fixed cost in total is 4,200. Divide that by our contribution margin in unit, and recall from earlier lessons that would be our selling price of $15 minus our variable expense per unit of $12 or $3 per unit. 3 divided into 4,200 is 1,400 units. So our break-even point is we would have to sell at least 1,400 units to break even. Well, it's nice that we walk through the formula, but what does that really mean? The break-even point is that minimum amount that you have to sell in order for your profit to be zero. You can also, again, in order for profit to be zero, you can look at it a couple of different ways too. You can say that point at which your sales just cover your cost, that's also a profit of zero, or that point at which your contribution margin, sales minus variable cost, just covers your fixed cost. Again, point at which profit is zero. Why is that helpful? Well, if I'm a company perhaps that's just starting, this company here, more products, and I'm just trying to understand what's the minimum amount I have to sell just to at least cover my cost, and I look at this and say 1,400 units. If I know I'm in a market that I'm probably only going to be able to sell 1,000 units, this is not a market I would want to enter because I'm nowhere near covering all my costs. But if I'm entering a market where I know, hey, sales are probably going to range between 3,000 and 5,000, definitely other things being equal, this is something that I would want to enter. Also, not just a new situation. Maybe I've hit hard times or recessionary times within my business, and I'm just wanting to understand, I know times are going to get tough. How much could I lose in sales before I get to the point where I'm not going to be able to cover my costs? I also want to point out, beyond just memorizing the formulas, something that may help you remember this formula a little bit better. Keep in mind, contribution margin per unit is sales minus variable expense. You know, after our sales dollars have covered our variable expense, what is left over, that's contribution margin, to then divide that in, cover our fixed expense, that would lead us to the break-even point. Beyond the break-even point in unit sales. Now, if we want it in dollars, you could say, well, Lisa, I can just take 1,400 units and I can multiply it times the selling price of $15 per unit and I can get the sales dollars. That is true, but I also want to make sure you know the formula for being able to calculate break-even in dollar sales, just in case you didn't have all the information that you need to do break-even in unit sales. It would be break-even in dollar sales is also fixed expenses, but not contribution margin dollars per unit, contribution margin ratio. Again, contribution margin ratio. We've already discussed the contribution margin ratio in prior lessons. That is our unit contribution margin dollars, which is our selling price of 15 minus 12 or $3, divided by our selling price, which is 15. 3 divided by 15 is 20%. We said in a prior lesson that we can look at that as 20 cents in contribution margin for every dollar in sales. If we divide that 20% contribution margin ratio into our fixed expense of 4,200, we get that we would have to sell $21,000 or 1,400 units in order to reach our break-even point. Again, it's important to know the other formula because what if you weren't given contribution margin dollars per unit, but you were given the contribution margin ratio? If you were given the contribution margin ratio, you could still calculate break even in dollar sales.